All right, I'm here today with Mr. Failure's Not an Option, Johnnie Coles, man. So nice to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. You know, it's a pleasure to be anywhere, actually. you know, doing some positive things.
Absolutely.
You know, after after years of doing negative stuff, you know, making it to the other side is like a breath of fresh air.
And let's talk about it, man. Big year coming up. 25 years of clean time coming up. How'd we get here, man? Talk about it.
Oh my God. You know, it's pretty amazing that it's going to be 25 years.
Yeah.
You know, how I got here, it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. You know, it originally took me 10 years to get 1 year clean. And, you know, after many failed attempts at, you know, trying, you know, I had a brilliant idea that I wasn't going to try anymore. And I was just going to stop, you know. But what happened was, you know, the drugs and the situations and, you know, the judge helped.
The judge? Yeah, let's talk about the judge.
The judge helped me make a decision, you know. It was like, well, Mr. Coles, seeing that you can't manage your own life, don't worry about it, I got you. You know, I got these here 9 years. You can take these 9 years and figure it out. And I had no idea how I was going to start a 9-year bid. But I knew one thing, and that one thing was it was either going to be this or I could make a change. And I came up with a mantra of failure is not an option, which is the mantra that I came up with. And I had enough. You know, so that was the beginning.
You know, we talk about that bullshit, all that bullshit that goes on inside, you know, inside the prison walls. You know, I've been there too. The negativity, the you know, everybody's the biggest drug dealer around. Everybody's got it like that on the outside. So how do you know, when I came out, I did the same shit that brought me there. So how do you form a new whole identity in there? You know, block out the negative. You talk about failure is not an option, and really create a strong mind.
Mm-hmm. So what I really did was I locked in to the failures not being an option. And what I did was I had to find the ways and means, right, to make that work. And so how I started while I was inside was I just stayed away from the negativity. And I started doing everything that I could that was positive. You know, I was a tutor at the school. And I got involved with any programming that they had. You know, they had a tier 4 program it was an inpatient treatment program. It was like a year long or whatever. And then there was an aftercare. So I did that. You know, it was in there that I started working on some steps, and I did those things. You know, I took some college courses while I was in there. They had some other programs that were positive. So it was just really about, you know, being positive as I could in a negative situation. And once I started to become positive in there, listen, if you can be positive in a negative environment, then you're halfway there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, what gets you those 9 years, right? Like, because everybody's gonna ask, like, how the fuck you get smacked on the head with 9 joints?
Yo, it was really ironic because I was out there, I was hustling, I wasn't making any money, I was hustling to use and using to hustle, right? So it was just one vicious cycle that was about I didn't have to pay for my drugs and getting high. I just managed to find a way to hustle to keep it going. You know, my biggest thing was I liked using. So I found a way to use, right? The best way I knew how. So in the process of using, one person that I sold to turned me on to the undercovers. And that was the beginning of the end. And for a lot of people look at, you know, going to jail as being probably the worst thing that could happen. But for me, it happened to be the best thing that happened for me. Because those 10 years that I had tried to stop and I kept using and stop and kept using, I never realized just what was really going on. But once I had the reality that, like, I was about to do 9 years, locked up for 9 years, it was a reality check.
You know, isn't it crazy, right? Like, we're so used to being able to wiggle as addicts, right? Like, maybe if I just tell them this, and those doors lock, and you get that mattress in the AP room, and you're dragging that mattress down, and you're thinking of every way possible you could get out of the situation you're in, and there's no way out. And for people like us, like, that's not normal. Usually we can talk a way out of a situation, manipulate, and here you are confronted with, you want to talk about tough love, with if you want to call it love or not, but like, here it is, and there's no talking your way out of it.
Right. So you know, for me, that was actually my second time that I had ever been sentenced to jail time. The first time I did an 18-month bid, and I came out and I met a girl. There's always a girl. Or for the girls,
Hostage.
There's always a guy. A hostage situation. And what happened was, you know, I had another bright idea. You know, she was smoking weed. I wasn't doing any drugs. And I wanted to help her by selling the drugs. So that's what got me back into the selling part. You know, and for a lot of people, they don't realize that the whole atmosphere, the whole using and selling and all of that is just one big garbage can. Right? And no matter what aspect of it you're in, if you're in it, you're in it. Because alcohol is a drug. Mm-hmm. So if you're drinking alcohol or you're smoking weed, and a lot of people don't consider weed to be that, but weed is a part of it. So I started selling the weed to her friends and her, and then I got back into selling the cocaine.
Because why sell weed when you can sell cocaine, right?
Why sell weed when you can sell cocaine? It's more, right? And then I never knew that she was a user. So then she started using, and now that she's using what my drug of choice was the cocaine, you know, I had another bright idea. You know, I'm like, man, listen, I'm going to use with her. And I used with her, and it was like, it was like I never stopped. From the moment I took that first one, I was right back in it.
Pedal to the metal. And I didn't talk about this before, but I met Johnnie. Me and Johnnie go in and talk to people in rehabs and bring a message of hope in. And, you know, every week I come in and you're such an inspiration to me. And on top of that, it's like you always say, you know, I'm glad I'm an addict and I was the last one to know. Right?
Yeah.
Like, we're the last one to know. And I like, talk a little bit about that, because we all think we're getting over on somebody.
Right.
You know?
So my biggest thing is, you know, listen, I was out there, and because I was a smart kid, right? I went to prep school. I grew up in the project. And I was able to escape the project, and I didn't go to the public school, but I did get a opportunity to go to prep school. So I went to prep school, and it was a shock. Yeah. It was a shock to my system, because here you have this poor kid from the project. I get to the prep school, and nothing there is normal. My normality had been removed. So now I was given a new set of circumstances that was anything but normal. At this school, it was dormitories.
What school is this?
This was Loomis Chafee.
Oh, okay, that's. I'll tell you a story after about Loomis Chafee.
So I went there, and the most surprising thing for me was being from the inner city. I'm used to high schools or schools being one building, right? So I landed on the campus, and this had it had classroom buildings, it had dormitories, it had a field house where it had basketball, and I was on the wrestling team. It had a swimming pool,
a hockey rink.
It had athletic fields and all sorts of things. It had a science center. So it was a shock to me. But what happened was I thought that I had arrived and I was better than the kids that I grew up with. Right. So some of that fueled, the arrogance, I was insanely like arrogant, right? And you couldn't tell me anything, and I knew I was better than everybody else now. And some of that is what got me into the using and thinking I know everything. And so it was just a whole scenario.
I know that, man, because I remember growing up, we didn't have as much money, and then my dad's got a better job, and I thought, we had arrived, right? And I go to college, and you find out, where you are really on the totem pole of life, so to say. My college roommate had a 16,000 square foot house in the Hamptons. There's other kids who their parents play professional sports. They're big stock. You find out what you think is a lot.
Yeah.
Is not a lot. And if you had a little going in, you really feel little.
Oh my God.
In the comparison.
I really felt little because I remember I was really ashamed and I was embarrassed to bring anyone home. Right. Because I lived in the project on the second floor of an apartment, and the apartment had a living room, a kitchen, and 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. So you can imagine that some of these kids had summer homes, right? That was bigger than
the whole project.
The whole project, and it was just it was just a shock to my whole system. But I did the best I could.
Yeah, and that's where that we talk about that egomaniac with an inferiority complex, how that stems, right? Is that outside you're gonna show everybody I think I'm the man, right? And I'm gonna show you how confident I am, but on the inside I'm just a child, I'm a lost child, and I don't want to show anybody how scared or how shitty I really feel about myself.
Right. I was an athlete. I was a wrestler, and I was a pretty good wrestler. My first year, I broke my leg wrestling. It was the biggest match of the year. It was Loomis versus Suffield, and it was a big rivalry. And I broke my leg. And my mom wasn't going to let me come back. And, I grew up without a dad, so it was already, again, I came from very humble beginnings. And, my mom had to work. She didn't have time to come and watch any of my games or, any of my matches or any of those things. And I felt that because I grew up without a dad. So it was hard. It was hard because some of the kids had parents and they were always at the matches, and you know, it was like I had to adopt some parents, and you know, I was a good wrestler, so you know, everyone was always proud of me, but you know, deep down inside I was like, man, if I only had a dad, or if my mom didn't have to work and she could come and watch me, someone could come and support me, because I really felt alone.
Yeah. I mean, I did have parents to support me, but I could see, like, you know, even with that, I felt alone. So I can't imagine not having that. And, you know, you go from there, and so you have all this self-esteem, and you went to this prep school, and things are going well. When do you find out, like, shit's not good anymore? You know, because we convince ourselves for so long, and you live in denial. You talked about 10 years of convincing yourself, like, stuff's okay. How does the train get rolling where shit's just not okay anymore?
So, it really started when I graduated from high school, right? Let me just go back 1 second. When I arrived on campus, one of the ways to fit in for me was, you know, I was from the inner city. I was already smoking weed, doing those things. So I could get weed for kids. Mm-hmm. So that was the fit in for me. So now I felt like, yeah, now I got something that I could use to my benefit, right? And that was the way that I fit in. But going past that, you know, when I graduated, you know, I had a couple opportunities. One of them was, and I didn't know because there was no experience for me. So I was a wrestler, and I had spoken to a school, Case Western Reserve out in Ohio, had called me up and wanted me to come and be a wrestler out there. I would get a full ride and stuff. And I refused it because I wanted to go to Syracuse. Because in my mind, going to a big school meant that I was with everybody else. Mm-hmm. I didn't really know that going to that school would have been the better choice, because now I had a chance to get schooling paid for. And when I got to Syracuse, I kind of navigated that on my own, but I didn't have any experience, so I only made it through one semester and I had to come home. So again, just imagine, you know, the shame and the guilt that I felt, you know, the embarrassment of going to this prestigious prep school, but now only doing one semester in college and having to come home, you know. And I started taking courses at the local community college, and, you know, I did some stuff there. I was tutoring, and I did that, but I started working, and that's when I met the first girl, right? Always a girl, right? And that's really where the drugs, other than the weed, she introduced me to the drugs, to the cocaine.
Because that's your identity's over, right? Like, so I went to school for 2 years. Like, my whole identity is I'm a hockey player. I'm gonna play professional hockey. You know, I'm a student athlete, and then a coach asked me not to come back anymore. You know what I mean? So now you go home, and all these people who you thought are your friends, and these people around, like, now what do I do now? I don't have a college degree. I got a high school diploma. I have no skills because I've been playing hockey, so I don't know how to bang a hammer. I don't know how to turn a screwdriver. So now what? You know, and that for me led to, like, you know, the smart idea, man. Let's make always a quick money shortcut.
Quick money.
You know, let's do it. The rap video show that's bullshit that you don't know at that age is really bullshit. Yep. And like I'm gonna go, you know, try and be the man at something else.
Yep.
You know, but this time it comes with a lot of consequences. So like, what does that look like? You know, you start with this girl and you dive in. Like, how quick does stuff fall apart.
Oh my God. You know, you know, I was a partier. You know, I had always been a partier. And so when I got the introduction to the cocaine through this girl, you know, it happened so quick that, you know, I just got sucked right in, and it was almost like an instant love affair, you know, with the cocaine. And, you know, I started snorting first, and it turned into something. I had my first job. My first job was at Friendly's, and you know, she lived around the corner from Friendly's. I was there, and you know, my manager is the first one that turned me on to smoking. And this was early 80s. This was like 83. Right? This was like 83. So a lot of what was going on back then was, you know, the whole Richard Pryor thing. He had gotten caught on fire, smoking cocaine, and so everyone's thing was like, oh, you can't smoke and you shouldn't smoke cocaine and this and that, but it didn't matter, man. I got turned on, and it was like I started selling it. And I started selling it to the job and to my manager, and he got caught out. I got caught out. The whole vicious cycle was, we don't stop until things get bad, and things got bad. Things got real bad. He quit. I continued the cycle at Friendly's, and we were you know, we were dishonest. There was money being taken and this and that.
Well, the crack game, man, like, people don't talk about this, right? Like, you shoot some dope, you fall asleep, you drink enough that you pass out. Like, that crack game is a whole nother animal, because once you hit that pipe, the chase is on, and there's no going to sleep until you can't keep your eyes physically open anymore.
And that's what it was. You know, it was the constant chase. It was the constant chase. You know, it was the early 80s, mid to early 80s. The cocaine was booming. It had just started booming. I had a Colombian connect, and the stuff was like super powerful and all of those things. So that whole thing turned into, it was like the beginning of the end, really. So I ended up getting fired at that job. I took some other jobs, but the drug use never stopped. It continued. And I navigated through jobs, and I did this, and I did whatever I had to do, but the addiction was there. And it had taken hold, and it was starting to call the shots. You know, I just didn't know it was calling the shots. You know, I thought I was still in control. And but there was no control. Looking at it now, I can see that there was no control. But man, it was like, man, it's time for you to show up. Yes, sir. What do I have to do? You know, it was like, you need to go get me some more. Yes, sir, right away. You know, and the drugs was calling the shots. And you know, that was the first exposure. That was the first arrest I had. I had other little jobs that I came into. They were retail jobs, and you know what happens in those games. You're gonna start robbing and stealing because the drug and the addiction is calling for more and more and more, you know? And of course, you know, the denial, don't even know I'm lying, right? That's the acronym for denial. Don't even know I'm lying. Is that I'm okay. I nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong with me. Something's wrong with everybody else, you know. And I just got caught up. And it just happened like that, off and on. I went to my first rehab probably in '88. And I was at a job, and I went to the rehab to save the job. And of course, if you go to rehab for anything other than yourself, it's not gonna be successful. And it wasn't. And long and behold, after a couple years of going back and forth to rehab, this and that, I was at an insurance company and they let me go. So I had another brilliant idea. I'd just be a seller. I would just be a dealer, and I was using. I was out there. So that whole thing lasted from about 92. I went to jail my first time in 95. I did an 18-month stint. I came out. I lasted for 3 years. But this was when I met the other girl and I started using again. So in 99, I started using probably in the winter, in maybe like February, March of 99. And in October of 99, I got pinched.
And you're getting smacked on the head with that, like when.
Yeah, so I was going so hard. I was selling and I was working and I thought I was doing my thing, and that's when I got that 9-year bid. That was in 99.
Are you relieved when that happens? Like, is it a breath of like?
You're never relieved. Let's just keep it 100. You're never relieved at the time it happens. It's only in retrospect, right? So now that I was able to sit down, because I sat for about a year.
Oh, okay.
Because what happened was when I got turned on to the undercovers, they met me in several different locations. So now I had 8 hand-to-hand undercover sales to these undercovers. And one time they met me at a school. So I got selling within 1,500 feet of a school. Mm-hmm. So all of those things happened. And not only that, they brought me into 3 different court systems. So I was in Rockville, Manchester, Hartford, Enfield, West Hartford. So I was all over the place.
You were doing the tour.
I was doing the tour. So man, it was just crazy. So when everything got wrapped up and I took the time, Rockville was the toughest one. Yeah. And because they all talked to one another, Manchester offered me 6. Rockville had a hard-on, and they wanted me to take the time in Manchester first so that I could come back and get a consecutive 3 years. So that's where the 9 came in. Had I been sentenced to them first and then took the 6, I would have been straight because it would have been a 6-year bid. Mm-hmm. But, things happen for whatever reason they happen. And, I'm just grateful today that everything turned out the way it did.
And what does it look like when you get out, man? Like, so all this stuff happens, you do all this good stuff, and then those doors open, right?
Yeah. So while I was in jail, right, that last year, I was doing really well. I was in jail, but I had outside clearance. So I was able to go out and then it was like building 7. I was up at in Carl Robinson. So they had building 7. Building 7 was the outside clearance building. So I did some stuff there. I still continued to do the stuff. I was a workout. I ran a workout class.
Body by Johnnie?
Yeah, something like that. It was just crazy. But what was going on was I didn't know, but I was already starting to formulate my mind, right, into something different. And I already knew I was at this point, I was in for almost 5 years. When I got out, I went to the halfway house. I had done 5 years in. And and my mindset had already transitioned. I had already transitioned that, you know what, this is it. And for some reason, when we know it's it, we know it's it. You know, I knew that I didn't want to use anymore. I was getting older and things weren't going to be different. I knew that from the hundreds of times that I stopped and started and stopped and started, you know. So when I developed the failure's not an option, you know, I went to the halfway house. And, you know, I got there, and the same day, I got 2 jobs that day.
Nice.
You know, so that was the beginning of the beginning, right? So I remember asking my mom for one last thing, you know, and that was a bicycle. Because I knew that if I had been in the halfway house before, I had a bicycle. So when I got to this one, I had the bicycle. I got the 2 jobs. So now I biked. I biked to both jobs, and I was in the halfway house the least amount of time that I could. And, you know, I had a full-time job and a part-time job, and I set some goals while I was in there. What I did was the goal I set was to save $10,000 before I got out. So I saved $10,000 working the 2 jobs at 9 months and just not giving up and not doing anything else.
And this is where people talk about like, oh, I gotta go get a good job when I get out, right? These weren't high-paying jobs that you're working.
They weren't high-paying jobs. One of them was the grocery store. Mm-hmm. I remember when I first got there, I was making $7.40. $7.40. And, but the hit for me was, the mindset was already there, man. And I said, if they asked me to stay late, it was like they didn't even have to once they opened their mouth, it was like, yes. It was like, would you like to stay? Yes. Would you like to come later, come early, come this, come that? No matter what they said, I said yes, 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 right? Because I knew there was something different. I knew that something different was coming down the pike. So I rode that bike, rain, sleet, snow. I rode that bike. It didn't matter because I was determined to do something different this time.
Well, you learned that before, man. Like that's that crack mentality. You put the crack mentality into real life.
You know, and that's the other part. You know, when we're out there when we're out there in the street, the mentality we have is no matter what, I'm going to use today. Mm-hmm. So when you take that same mentality and you apply it to some positive stuff, nothing can stop you. Mm-mm. So I was determined not to have anything stop me, and that's what happened. So it was kind of funny. I was working at a hotel full time. I was at the front desk, you know, and then I was working at Price Right, and I was working at the grocery store, and I remember being at the front desk. I gave a couple rooms out, right? And I went in one day and, you know, they pulled it over. I got pulled over, you know. And I was like, what's going on? And they were like, yeah, so we're convinced you're selling rooms and you're stealing the money and this and that. So they had everything calculated for me, and I got fired.
Yeah.
I got fired. And I was devastated. I was devastated. I had no idea how I was going to make it now, right? Because what had happened when I got out of the halfway house, I went on parole. So my parole officer told me, he said, I was going to go to a rooming house or something like that. He was like, nah, I want you to get your own apartment. And that was another... There were a sequence of things that happened for me that I couldn't have managed without those things happening, right? One of them was the parole officer was really good. He was like, get yourself your own apartment. That was the best thing that could have happened. I got the apartment. One of the managers at the hotel was leaving, so I got to buy her car, right? So I couldn't have a car at the halfway house, but I bought the car and left it at the hotel until I got out. So when I got out, I already had wheels. I had the car, and now I was starting to make gains, and I was still determined, man. You know, mindset is everything. And that's the thing we have to understand, is that we have to have mindset. We have to set some goals. We have to get some focus, right? And we have to get, take advantage of every opportunity. The thing about opportunities is opportunities don't go away. They just go to someone else, right? So I took advantage of the opportunities I had. I had to get focused, and I stayed focused, man. I stayed focused.
Because people always want to talk about, like, motivation, right? Like, I'm going to do what I got to do. I'm motivated. Like, at some point, the motivation wears off, man, and you're left with the discipline, right? Like, what do I do every day no matter how I feel? Like, it doesn't matter if I'm sad today. It doesn't matter if it's raining out. Like, I got to do what I have to do in order to have the life I want to have, be able to provide for my family, be able to provide for myself, but really keep a drug out of my body. Yeah. And, like, what does that look like for you on a daily basis of like, your discipline?
Yeah. So my discipline came with, I knew this time was different. I went to the halfway house. I was going to meetings. I would get passes. I would ride to the meeting. But my whole goal was just save this money. Save this money and do what I had to do. And that's what I did. So when I got out of the halfway house, I was there. But it wasn't enough. I knew I knew that it was different this time. It was different from any other time that I had stopped using. I couldn't stop using on the street. Jail gave me the platform to actually stop using and get some separation from the street. So now I accumulated some time and some separation, so the draw to use was a lot less. Right? So I just used everything that I had. I used everything that I had, and I have to contribute a lot of this to a higher power, which I consider God, because I thank Him, and I'm grateful. They talk about, when you're an addict, they talk about grateful addicts don't use. So when we find ways to continue to be grateful on a daily basis, it just makes it so much easier not to use. So then when I came out, I had 5 years clean, and I just went from there. I stayed. I kept going to meetings, and the time just kept climbing, man. The time kept climbing.
Now you sit here, man. You're a business owner, right? Like you no longer work for somebody else. Now you work for Johnnie Coles, right? You're an author. What is this? What does your company mean to you? What does working for yourself mean to you? Because a lot of people talk, like, we go to meetings and they're 5 years, 10 years clean, and they're talking about, like, I'm still just getting by, right? Like, life is the same it was at 2 years clean as it was at 10, and I was always the person, like, that's not for me. Right? Like, if I'm trying to be the best person I can, I want to be the best person I can in every facet of my life. Yeah. Physically, mentally, emotionally, financially. I can't help other people if I'm poor, right? I can help them with my knowledge, but I can't go out and help somebody and show them, some freedom of life. And what does that look like for you, being able to do that kind of stuff?
So here's how things came full circle for me. I remember being in jail, being in prison. While I was in prison, the guards always looked at you as crap. Or, oh yeah, we've heard it all before. We seen this dude come and go, and that's what happens, right? Because when you're in jail, people always say, "Oh, I'm never coming back," and then next week you're like, "What happened?" Oh, listen, parole is pretty simple, right? It's simple. It says, don't break any rules.
Any.
Right. So when dudes come back, they were like, "Oh, I got caught driving with no license." So you don't need license? And those are the things, what are you willing to risk for your freedom? And I wasn't willing to risk anything. When they said, don't leave the state, I didn't leave the state. Mm-hmm. I didn't leave the state. People would go down to the city. It was like, "Oh, I'm going to the city. I'm going to Mass. I'm going to this. Listen, man, for no reason did I do any of those things. If spitting on the sidewalk meant that I could go back, I'm not spitting on the sidewalk. It was just that simple. And again, it all goes back to, the mindset. The mindset had been changed, man. The transformation had started. So I remember telling the CEOs when I was in jail, I said, if I get the opportunity to help someone when I get out, I'm going to do it. So when I got to my first, when I was at the grocery store, I was a produce manager. So I gave dudes opportunities. Mm-hmm. Now, when we give people opportunities, we just have to know that we've done all that we can do. Now, I'm not responsible for you keeping the job. I'm only responsible for helping you get the job. Mm-hmm. Cause in Narcotics Anonymous, it talks about, desire. We can't determine I can't tell you what your desire is, right? It says you just have to have a desire to stop using. So if you have a desire to stay at the job or not to use or to do the right thing, then that's your desire. I can't tell you how much desire you have to have. So it was from there, I knew I wanted something more though. So that's when, after a while, I started, I got a mentor. I didn't know he was a mentor at first, but I found someone that showed me a couple things, and he gave me a couple directions. He said, try this. I tried a few things before I landed on this company that worked. And, I tried flipping houses. It didn't work. I tried wholesaling houses. It didn't work. My nephew came along and he was like, "Yo, let's flip cars." Cause my nephew was flipping cars, this and that. I said, "Okay, we can do this." I put up the money to do that, right? That didn't work because he came along, he stole all the money, he took the cars and all of this stuff. People come along and they have their own objective. But when you come along and you're focused, things are gonna happen along the way. But your drive and your focus is gonna see you through those things. So it saw me through those things. I got through all of that stuff, man. And I finally ended on this. My nephew came back again and said, "Let's try this mobile detailing." I didn't know anything about mobile detailing or none of that stuff. He had the experience, so I got a van, we filled it up, we put all the stuff in, and he was running stuff. I said, "Listen, you got to run stuff while I'm at work, this and that." It went well at first, but in the end, I had to fire him because, again, he had disappointed me. He was a disappointment, and it didn't go well. But the amazing thing was, once I got rid of him, now the ball was in my court. And immediately I started making money because I was able to go out, get those jobs done, and now I started doing my thing, and I started to feel good about this next thing that I was doing. Because I had a saying. This was my saying. If I work 25% as hard for me as I did for any company that I worked for, I have to be successful. I have to be successful because when I worked for other companies, I worked as if that was my company. And I always did well in my jobs because it was a responsibility. I worked hard. So I knew that I had it in me. So I took that with me, man. I was like, man, all I got to do is work 25% as hard for myself as I work for that company, and I got to be successful, right? And I was listen, man, I'm one of those dudes. I'm always pumped. I'm always excited, right? And my excitement is infectious.
Absolutely.
Because no one likes a person that, yeah, how are you today? Yeah. I come in and I bring the energy, and I always brought the energy. I've always been a morning person. I would go into work in the morning and I was like, I'm at like a 10 at 6 in the morning, and people are like, man, I ain't even had my coffee yet.
Come simmer down over there.
Simmer down. So that was how I started the company.
And you talk about that, man. It's like you kind of said how NA works, right? We call it a sponsor, right? If you call it a recovery program, we call it a sponsor. In business, you call it a mentor, right? Like, why am I going to try and reinvent the wheel if somebody could show me little shortcuts on how to get there?
Yeah.
Right? And that brings me to, like, how does this happen, man? We got books, we got workbooks. Like,
so,
how do we get here? How do you become an author?
So this is the book. And again, I adopted that failure's not an option. And I got here because I started the business. And when I started the business went well. And after 3 years of running the business, it went so well, I was able to step out. Right. So when I stepped out, now it's been 6 years that I stepped out and I never had to go back, and I call it firing my boss, right? and I know that's one thing that a lot of people would like to do, but failure's not an option is because I failed so many times that this was it. And failure is not an option is one of those things that I failed my way into success. You learn
all the ways not to do something, right?
I learned all the ways not to do stuff. So I knew that there was something else I wanted to do. I did the business. I got into the business. I started making money, and I wanted to be a motivational speaker because I wanted to show people that after it took me, I was caught out for about 15 years with the drugs and the alcohol. I went to jail. I finally got out and I finally stayed clean, and now I stayed working for 14 years. I came out in 2004, and I worked from 2004 to 2018, and then when I left the job force, and I was into my own business at this point, I knew that there was something more. There was still something more, and that's why I'm always telling people, man, listen, I don't know what your purpose is. I don't know what your why is, but you have to find your purpose and you have to find your why. Because once you can identify those things, now you have a shot. You got a shot. We all have equal shots, you know? It depends on what do you want to do? What does success look like for you? Because it looks different for most people. You said a few minutes ago there are people that are in recovery and they're just recovering and they don't care if, you know, if they do this or they do that. You know, staying clean is all that they want to do. But for me, it was different, man. I knew I was destined to do something else. So I wanted to help people, man. You know, I started this business and I started helping people, and then I got into, you know, the motivational speaking, and I go into schools, you know, and then I developed you know, I wrote this, and then I came out with a workbook to this. So I have the Failure's Not an Option book, and then I have the workbook coincides with it. And there's some principles and some applications in here that, you know, just anyone can learn, you know, and I have a platform about, you know, helping people come out of the prison of average. And what that looks like is different. Again, it's different for different people. Because what is your prison? Food, credit cards, drugs, dysfunctional families, dysfunctional relationships, gambling, you know. There's average Joes out there that have prisons that they just can't get out of, you know. As a society, you know, we're a dysfunctional society because our society hinges on, oh, you have a toothache, take this. You have a headache, take this. You got a backache, take this. So our society is constantly pushing, you know, not how to get well emotionally or generically, right? It's like, take this and you'll feel better. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens. Everyone starts taking pills and this and that, and before you know it, you're caught out. You're caught out, you know?
Take this little $500 credit card. Don't spend no more money.
Yeah, take this little you know, and it's crazy because depending on how you grew up is going to determine how things work out for you. You know, a lot of us grow up and, you know, there's never enough. There's never enough. So because I grew up and there was never enough, I never learned about how to use credit cards, how to use banks properly, how to save money and do those things. Because when you grow up and there's never enough, how do you get to do that? You know? So those are some of the things that I learned along the way of me starting the business and running this this platform, that I want to show people how to navigate, you know, their business and their life.
That's so nice, man. And I'm so happy to have had you here. I'm so happy to have you in my life. Like, I can't tell you how inspiring you are to me. And, you know, we're going to put the book up. We'll put a link up on our Facebook, on all our social media. You guys will have a place to go get the book. Get the book. Learn some stuff. This man's a genius. Mr. Failure's Not an Option, Johnnie Close. Thank you so much for being with me, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me here. And I really appreciate you giving me, you know, a vehicle so that, you know, I could share my story and let other people know that, you know, like, failure's not an option for you as well, you know. And It's just going inside and figuring out like what's going on and how can you do something different. But I'm no different from you. I'm no different from Hank. It's all about figuring out what do you want to do.
Awesome, man.